Hello gamers, so when it comes to Rockstar, one thing I can't deny are their single player story driven games tend to be pretty freaking phenomenal. GTA 4 gave us a great story led by top Slav boy himself Niko Bellic, and Red Dead Redemption 2 gave us a broken heart that I am yet to recover from. It seems as though anything Rockstar touches turns to gold, assuming it doesn't have much to do with the multiplayer. So that's why when rumours started emerging that the studio could be working on an open world game set in the medieval ages, I and many others got a massive gaming boner. I love anything to do with boners. I mean medieval. I meant medieval. Game of Thrones, The Witcher, Fable, The Last Kingdom, anything, and having one of the top tier studios supposedly working on it, well that's pretty damn exciting. A lot of people have been giving their ideas and thoughts for this rumoured title and what it could possibly be like. So in this video I'm going to do the same and tackle the age-old question, what if Rockstar made a medieval game? If you enjoy this video and feel like supporting what I do, then smack the like button, comment down below and subscribe. Anyway, let's begin. Now, as much as I would love this game to be an RPG, the chances are very low of that being the case, considering that Rockstar don't really do RPGs. Whilst I believe you will be able to upgrade your character's weapons and armor, things like leveling your stats, picking perks, customizing your character's facial structure, and main story choices that lead to 10 different outcomes won't be in the game. Rockstar likes to pick a story, stick with it, and tell it well, with very few choices throughout, usually resulting in character changes rather than world-altering transitions. And if Red Dead Redemption 2 is anything to go off of, then the story in this game could be something special. If Rockstar were to do a game set in the medieval ages, things like dragons and magical swords probably wouldn't be in the game either. The studio tends to lean on the more realistic side, so anyone hoping for the Skyrim experience but with a Rockstar story, sorry, but you'll more than likely be disappointed. Though for me, the appeal of a Rockstar game is the narrative, the in-depth characters, and the meticulous open world, and each time they release a game, they deliver on all aspects. Predicting the story for this game is a bit more tricky than their previous titles. Grand Theft Auto is set in the modern age, so we expect things like fast cars, gangs, and rocket launchers. Red Dead Redemption is set in the Wild West, so we know it'll have shootouts, horses, robberies, and you know, cowboy stuff. But a medieval setting only gives us so much in terms of story. I'm sure we'll have kings, queens, and war, but apart from that, it's tough to predict what it could be about. However, if you wouldn't mind indulging my creative side for a moment, here's my pitch. I would have our main character be a knight to the king. We travel around by his side, protecting him from any danger and obeying his every command. He tells us to do some morally ambiguous tasks, which we as the player have to decide whether to follow his order or defy it. This could then bring into play Red Dead Redemption's morality meter. So for example, let's say the king finds out a servant has been stealing food from the kitchen and tasks you to cut off his hand. Now you have to decide to follow the command or plead with the king to forgive him. If you follow the command, you'd get rewarded and earn the king's trust, but if you disobey it, you would get a pay cut, reprehended, and other forms of punishment. Like, let's say there's a moment in the story where the king's drunk and tries to do some terrible acts to his servants, but you stop him. The king could then get upset and give you lashings which leave scars on your body throughout the rest of the game. The actions you perform would in turn give you the reputation amongst the people as being a good man or a bad one, and they would react accordingly to your choices. This could then lead to missions and quests that are only available depending on your morality. Rockstar's already showed a ton of depth and detail in RDR2, so I wouldn't be surprised if they did bring this kind of mechanic to any of their future titles. Now that was just a quick little idea that I came up with, but there are a ton of different stories to tell and gameplay mechanics to play around with, and with the giant team at Rockstar that consists of some of the very best writers the medium has to offer, they'll most likely pick a plot that's a million times better than whatever I just came up with. As soon as rumours emerged about the setting, the worry wasn't whether Rockstar could deliver a good story, create interesting characters, or give us a stunning world, but rather the gameplay. Now, as much as I loved Red Dead Redemption 2, and believe you me, I did, it's one of only 3 games I've ever rated a 10 out of 10, and as of right now, it's currently my favourite game of all time, the gameplay, however, left a lot to be desired. As great as the animations, hunting, and other side activities were, the gunplay felt unresponsive or delayed. The close combat wasn't that great either, and the controls to do some of the most simplest of tasks like mounting your horse were clunky, and often you would end up tackling a random person to the ground or punching them in the face. These concerns from the fans are definitely warranted. However, I feel as though given that swordplay would be the main way to engage in combat, they would focus heavily on that to make sure that it does feel good and responsive. Rockstar aren't ones to half-ass their their titles. They're not afraid to delay their games and spend upwards of 8 years on them. Not to mention the countless amount of video games throughout the years to use swords and melee as their primary way of combat have set up an accessible foundation for Rockstar to pluck off and craft as their own. The game would most certainly also be mature. Very mature. Knowing the success of Game of Thrones and The Witcher 3, it seems a gritty and adult take looks likely. I mean, it wouldn't be the first time Rockstar showed boobs or some guy getting slashed in half in their game, so yeah, this really wouldn't come as a shock to anyone. Though in a setting like the medieval ages, it could go even further. When war took place, it was, as you already know, very bloody, vile, and unforgiving. When one side won the battle, the other side would have their men beheaded and tortured, and the women would be left to the invaders. Now, Rockstar have always been known to tread the line and sometimes cross it, and they paid the price by getting a ton of backlash from the, sensitive people. In Grand Theft Auto 5, there was that whole torture scene that they caught heat over, and a bunch more that you probably already know of, yet they never stray away from telling their story and building the world they want to build, no matter how dark it may get at times. And in the medieval ages, it would be disingenuous to not show the harsh reality of life back then, especially if it is based on reality. I mean, come on, it wasn't all knights in shining armor and damsels in distress, okay? It wasn't Shrek or a Disney movie. It was poverty and war. The rich would eat and the poor would starve. Now, of course, if there were any scenes that may go too far, as they've already demonstrated with the torture scene in GTA 5, Rockstar would most assuredly put a warning sign beforehand and allow the player to skip the scene if they didn't have the stomach. Though with Game of Thrones already showing us things like the Red Wedding incest and a demon shadow baby coming out of a witch's freaking vagina, I don't think anything could shock me. Now let's talk about the open world for a bit and what exactly we could expect from it and how it could tie in with the story. Now again, I do need to state this is all speculation and some wishful thinking on my part. No concrete evidence or reliable sources have leaked anything solid. This whole rumor stems from a job listing on LinkedIn and a Reddit post which I don't need to tell you how untrustworthy that is. But let's just go along with it for a bit of fun. Well, firstly, let's talk time period. The medieval ages were spread across over 1,000 years, so there's a lot of time to play around with. They could set it around 800 AD since this is when the Vikings raided England. Now I know what you're going to say. Oh, but Assassin's Creed is already doing Vikings. And yeah, but you do know just because a game has the same setting doesn't mean it'll give the same experience. I mean, how many games have we had set in New York and no one ever complains about that, but oh, you have God of War and Assassin's Creed incorporate Vikings one time and all of a sudden it's been done 1,000 times. Grow up. Alright, but seriously, jokes aside, I don't see any problem with that setting, though personally I would have it set a couple hundred years later, around 1066, specifically following the events of the Norman invasion. Now I'm not going to go through the entire history of it as it's, as you can imagine, quite long, so to put it very briefly, in 1066, Edward the Confessor dies, but since he didn't have a son or a daughter to take the throne, the Earl of Wessex gets elected as the new king, though this wouldn't sit well with everyone. Edward's death started a fight over the English throne, and this led to the invasion of Britain by Harold Hardrada and William the Conqueror. Now a ton of stuff happens here, but in the end, spoiler alert, which doesn't actually make sense now that I think about it considering this happened over 1,000 years ago, King Harold defeated Harold Hardrada at the Battle of Stamford Bridge, but was later killed at the Battle of Hastings, where William the Conqueror would then take the throne. And fun fact about the Battle of Hastings, by the way, William brought his jester along to the battle, and his jester was actually the first casualty of the event. Yeah, he was poking fun at the English soldiers, taunting them by juggling swords, and all of a sudden he got an arrow to the knee. I mean face, probably, I don't know. Anyway, that's actually what initiated the historic skirmish, and history lesson over. So where would our main character lie in all of this? Well, here's my idea. Our protagonist would be the knight to Harold Hardrada. He would go on to watch his king die at the battle, failing as a knight to protect him but live on to see another day. Then he'd pledge his loyalty to William the Conqueror and fight in the Battle of Hastings, to which, as I've already said, he would win. This would all happen before the first half of the game and give the player already 2 big battles to fight in. William the Conqueror was also quite the harsh man, determined to use force to impose his will on the nation he had conquered. He was so successful at it that the Anglo-Saxons became second-class citizens in their own country, so this would create a lot of possible conflict between our main character and his new king. Now you're probably thinking, what's the point of all of this? Why are you talking about the history as if Rockstar would actually incorporate key historic figures and events like Assassin's Creed or something? Well, here's the thing. In Red Dead Redemption, there wasn't exactly a ton of history to take part in, as the cowboy era only lasted about 50 years. However, key historic moments in a medieval England setting is much harder to avoid since it's basically everywhere. But then again, the studio does like to do their own thing, so you never know. Rockstar created, in my opinion, the most detailed gaming world ever in RDR2, and I'm sure they would take the same approach with this game. Games like Grand Theft Auto allow the studio to go crazy bananas with jetpacks, rocket launchers, and supercars that can fly, though with the older setting, as they've already demonstrated with Red Dead Redemption, it seems the more grounded and realistic approach is preferable. Now, I'm not saying I'd be opposed to magical creatures and mythical lore, it's just that Rockstar know how to create realistic games so well. They know how to create characters we care about and have worlds filled with insane detail and content. So it's just I wouldn't want them to have to compromise and potentially sacrifice any of these aspects to create from scratch lore, creatures, and magical gameplay elements. We already have a crazy amount of fancy RPGs, so I think something that leans on realism and focuses on a grounded world and story would be a nice change of pace. Alright, look, to be serious for a second, Rockstar has created the greatest games ever. They are the role model studio and they've shown everyone just how it should be done and never strayed away from being themselves. Their games have changed my life and I feel as though they should be allowed to do whatever they want because, well, they deserve it for being just simply the best at everything in the world. Alright, that was all a lie, just want another medieval game. Okay, you happy now? Well, that'll do it for this video. Did you like it? Did you like it? Good, then smash like, comment down below and subscribe. Also, side note, I've started streaming, so follow me on Twitch, link in description. Thanks for watching, bye!